again. This is another video about the recording of, every part of the process, right, of the making the music for Doctor Who: The Edge of Reality. And this, in theory, should be a really long video, but I'm going to try and challenge myself to do a quick version of this. So I wanted to speed through an overview of the whole thing, of how a cue gets made from point A to point Z. If point A is me seeing the script for the first time and Z is here it is on the soundtrack. Because of the nature of the way the game was made and delays and various things, it made sense for me to start writing to the script. So I got Gavin Collinson's brilliant script and absorbed that and spotted that. So spotting is where you go through an edit of a film or a game or whatever it is, and you write notes. You write, this is where music should come in, this is where it should go out, this is what it should sound like, these are the themes that we should reference in it, and this is where the energy should shape the scene. And then when I'd done that, I sketched the piano version of the theme. And sometimes that was a really fleshed out sketch, and it sounded, you know, a lot like the final product. The melodies were there, the harmonies were there.
A million years from now, or was it last week? Reality itself was almost destroyed. It was saved by a hero, a mysterious traveller in time.
And other times it wasn't. It was me really roughly boshing something out and then just writing in a marker, do something better than this. Or do something that's, you know, a bit like this, but half as slow, and then use cellos in the middle, and then, you know, introduce a really gnarly synth and do all of these other things. So a combination of an audio sketchbook of how I wanted things to sound and loads of notes explaining other stuff. Then the next stage of the process is to build that sketch up so it becomes less of a guide and more of a finished thing. You do your best at making it sound, you know, polished and pro and as good as it can possibly sound. And then if you're really lucky, the orchestra recording is a separate bit on top of that. So this level was all about taking those sketches and then really making them work musically. So because I knew I was recording with an orchestra, some of the cues that we were going to record the orchestra on, I used virtual instruments, which are fake orchestra instruments, which they all sound brilliant. Probably more than half, to be honest, of the films and TV things that you watch with orchestras on will be using these. They won't have the budget, or they won't want to release the budget to record a live orchestra, which is very sad, but they sound so good that most people probably won't be able to tell the difference, to be honest. So we used these great samples and did mock-ups, as they're called, of these cues. So the producers on the game know how everything's going to sound. They're really confident that when we go into the session, I'm not going to come back with a load of stuff that's, you know, they haven't heard at all before, or they couldn't get it in their head how it's going to sound. Once I've heard them in game, I've got a bit of a better idea of maybe that one needs to be a little less busy, or maybe this one needs to ramp up slightly more at the end, or the timing changes a little bit, and there's a bit of back and forth to make stuff work as well as it can. And then the next step is to take all of the stuff that I'm doing with the orchestra and send that to Tristan Noon, who's the orchestrator that I use most of the time. And Tristan's brilliant. I send him all my stuff, and he knows, stylistically, he knows how I write, he knows why I've done certain things. I like slightly crunchy harmonies, so I get less notes from him now saying, are you sure you meant F sharp there and not G natural? So he takes all of that stuff and he makes the parts for the orchestra. And thankfully, because I've done a fair bit of orchestral writing generally, I've got a reasonable handle on stuff like what's feasible for a section, what kind of stuff is playable on a virtual instrument but not going to work that well in a live session, and vice versa as well. So I try to give him stuff that doesn't have fixes required. It's more about just polishing, and he'll come back and say stuff like, you know, I don't think that flute's going to cut through, so I think you need to take the brass down a dynamic, and maybe if you put an oboe an octave below the flute, that'll just help you cut through a little bit more, and you'll just pick up on that melody, and like little things like that, which is really useful to have. So he'll do all of that stuff. He'll send the scores to me and I'll read through them and check that they're okay. And then those are the parts that we deliver on the day to the players. And then for this, we were incredibly lucky to record at Air Studios in London, which is where a few weeks prior they were recording the James Bond score with Hans Zimmer. So I think I've sort of put two and two together, and I think that's why it took me so long to get a confirmed date in December. But we got in, and we did a brilliant, socially distanced session. I think we had as many players as they were allowed to fit in the hall with social distance settings in place. And it was a really nice atmosphere because I got the sense that at least at the time, partly just because this is the way things go, because people like to do violins separately, brass separately, woodwind separately, because it gives them more control in the mix. And partly because people wanted, if you want 30 brass players, that's the room. With COVID and distancing, you couldn't have anyone else in the room, so you'd have to get all the brass players and then all the strings. But because I didn't do it that way, I had just under 30 players, but I had a full orchestra of 30 players, so I had strings, brass, woodwinds, all in the same room, all at the same time, and they really enjoyed it because they hadn't had that experience of playing with the other sections and getting that feedback, and they seemed to like the music as well. So yeah, it was a great session. We got tons of stuff recorded. Jake Jackson did a brilliant job. Tons of mics, loads of great takes of stuff. And then the next step from there was to send all of the stuff from the orchestral session, plus all of the other stuff I'd done, the synth stuff and everything, to Rich Aitken, who's a mixer, who his job is basically to take everything that I've done and make it sound better. And make it sound uniform, so it all sounds like it's part of the same whole. And with very little from me in terms of input, he just took that stuff and ran with it and made it sound amazing. And that is what you hear on the final album. It's a combination of my writing and arrangement and production and orchestration, some orchestration polish, and then music printing from Tristan, the amazing work from the session players on the day, and the arrangement and the engineering by Jake Jackson, and then finally the mixing by Rich Aitken, who did a great job.
Right, let's get back to Coal Hill and do a bit of investigating. After all, that's how it all...
And there's loads of other people. There's Sam Thompson conducted. There's the Jenny from Hilary Skew's fixed the session, got all of the players involved and stuff. There's loads of people involved when you do a big undertaking like a big orchestral session, and they're all important and make a contribution to stuff sounding the way it does. So I'm very grateful for everyone who helped out on this, and very, very happy with the way it sounds.